solitude can really help us go deep, but connection is how we see ourselves reflected back with warmth. And both of those matter. And when we try to replace one with the other or explain away the tension with a shiny new label that I'm pretty sure the internet made up, we miss the truth underneath. Welcome to the Intimate Philosopher, where philosophy meets intimacy and life's biggest questions finally feel at home. I'm Dr. Emma Smith. I'm a licensed professional counselor, certified sex therapist, and existential philosophy nerd, inviting you to join me for an after-hours conversation. This is a space to slow down, pour a glass of wine, or maybe a cup of tea, and explore the messy, beautiful intersections of meaning, connection, desire, and being fully human. This is the place for real conversations about the parts of life that don't fit neatly into a box. So, grab your glass, get comfy, and let's dive in. Hi, friends. I am so glad you're here. Lately I've been thinking a lot about connection. And in some sense, we live in an age of constant connection. Our phones buzz, our screens are glowing, and our attention is pulled outward again and again and again. And in so many ways, we've never been more connected. We know what our friends ate for breakfast and what our ex is doing on vacation. And by the way, why are you still looking at their feed? We also know what a stranger in Paris thinks about the state of the world. And arguably, we have never been more connected, at least in the most technical sense. And yet, when the phones finally go dark and when the noise settles, when the room that we're in gets quiet, there's this question that tends to surface. And that question is, why do I feel so alone still? Maybe you have felt it. In many ways, we're more visible than ever, too. Observed, consumed, reacted to. And yet, we are known by very few. This isn't the kind of loneliness that we see in movies or even read about in books. It doesn't look like isolation or abandonment. We're not being sent anywhere. No one is locking us in someplace. It's a kind of loneliness that lives inside of full calendars and near constant stimulation. It's the loneliness that lives beneath the scroll and the kind that comes from being everywhere, but also not fully anywhere. Let's be real. This podcast exists because I wanted a different kind of space. I wanted it long form, unrushed, and in the best ways possible, unclickable. This is an after-hours conversation. It's not the version of me that you might meet in a therapy office or see presenting at a conference or hear in a polished soundbite. I'm here today literally wearing a fleece zip-up and a beanie, but one day it could be a flannel and jeans, and I'm still wearing heeled boots, wedges, let's be honest. But this is about being more grounded and showing up in this more real way. And I want this to feel like the kind of conversation that happens in a living room late at night when we have finally stopped performing and we start telling the truth. So today I want to talk about what it means to feel connected in a world that never stops asking for our attention. In my work as a therapist, it's really interesting because I've been doing this work long enough now. And also I entered at this particular cusp point between when people were really starting to get online in a new way. And yet, the very tools meant to keep us close often leave us feeling more disconnected. So today I want to ask a simple but maybe unsettling question. What does intimacy become when attention is the most valuable currency that we have? Before we go deeper, I want to share something that is meaningful to me. Each month, I write something called The Inner Circle, and it is a short reflection for people who want more connection and less noise. You can sign up at soliloquy.co. I'll link it in the show notes. And I want you to think about it as a conversation that continues. And, it's like a glass of red wine for your inbox. As a thank you, I will also send you my desire inventory, which is a short guide to help you understand what might be getting in the way of feeling turned on, alive, and at home in your body and in your relationships. And it'll point you in the right direction as to where you might want to explore next. Okay, let's get back to the show. So I want to get something out of the way. I am not anti-technology. This podcast is possible because technology has caught up to allow somebody like me with no production experience and relatively simple equipment be able to produce something that is truly incredible and I'm so proud of. And yet, the way that we have designed our technology at this point in time, we've made it in such a way that technology is giving us something that looks like intimacy, and at the same time, it falls short of it. What do I mean? Okay, so for example, we have access to people without the vulnerability of actually having to talk to them. We are able to expose ourselves to people and ideas and sometimes literally exposure of our bodies to others without physical risk. Somebody's going to fight me on that. I know. Stay with me. We also have this ability to have people be present to us and have us be present to others without actually being embodied in that moment. And so what happens? I think that we run the risk of substituting being seen in this very observed kind of way for being known. And we can mistake responsiveness for care. Regardless of how many likes you get, and I understand that certain platforms now have the love, it's not just like, it's love, or when's the last time that you hit the care emoji instead of actually taking the time to craft a message that communicated that you cared. We also confuse consumption with connection. And in that endless stream of interaction, our attachment systems, they never fully settle into themselves or into our relationships. We end up being surrounded, but not held. We end up being observed, but not felt. And on the flip side of that, we also don't get to feel somebody being in our presence either. And it's really interesting because the research is now catching up to reflect what so many people are already sensing in their bodies. Despite unprecedented access to others, loneliness is rising across generations. Studies consistently show that increased screen time, it correlates with lower psychological well-being, including greater loneliness, even as that whole quote unquote social connection expands. We have more contact, but we have less resonance. And because real connection requires something the digital world cannot replicate, which is embodied presence, we end up expending more energy outwards than is coming in as a result. By the way, if you want to read the study that I'm talking about here, I will link it in the show notes for you because if you're like me, you want to go read this. Now, I did tell you I'm I'm not anti-technology, right? And I think that there's kind of this really, meta quality to what I'm about to tell you because recently a friend of mine who arguably, if it weren't for social media, I would not be in contact with anymore. He reached out to me and asked what I thought about this post that he had seen on Instagram. And the post said something like, if you crave solitude but still crave connection, you're not confusing. You're an, I think it was introvert. And I stared at this message for a moment and then I thought, no, that just means you're a human being. People need both. We need solitude. We need real solitude, the kind that is actually absent of noise and lets us hear ourselves think, not the kind where we're alone but still feel tethered to a feed. That's not what I'm talking about. We also need connection, and not just any connection. We need safe connection. It's the one where the public mask can come off and where nothing is being performed. And so, of course, he resonated with that because when something finally puts words to an experience that you've had in your body, yeah, of course, it can feel like relief, even if the explanation itself is flimsy. I mean, this is, label culture, it feels like, where we're going to slap a label on every experience because we're so desperate to belong to something that the belongingness, it doesn't even have to be any deeper than a, I don't know, universal human experience, but now we have a label so we can feel more connected. I mean, we will definitely have this conversation more than once. I think that's even where the deeper conversation, even just for today, really begins. Because what that is hinting at, and I think what for my friend, he might have been resonating with, is that for many people, solitude became safe long before connection ever did. And not because people are introverted, not because they're wired differently, but because being with others, if you learn that being with other people means vigilance and means self monitoring or emotional risk, well, solitude offers things like control and predictability and quiet. And the nervous system also learns alone is safer. And that doesn't mean that connection isn't desired. It means that it's longed for and at the same time mistrusted. So instead of asking, what label explains me best? I think a more honest question is, where did I learn that being with others wasn't safe enough to rest? And if we bring this back to technology, I think tech fits really neatly into this pattern. It offers something that resembles connection without asking us to risk our nervous systems. And if you are one of those people who's like, I just can't with the people. Listen, I understand. 2020, when the world was shutting down, I had clients and people in my life who were, within a matter of days, it seemed like we're crawling the walls. And I can tell you that as a true introvert, I did not miss being around people, no joke, until mid-July of 2021. Okay. So I understand that not everybody craves connection. It took me 18 months to miss people. It took until mid 2021. So I hear you. I hear you. And here's the thing that technology does to get me back on track. We can be near people without being vulnerable. We can be seen without being known. And when we're tired, overwhelmed, or guarded, that can feel like enough. I use the story of the 2021 thing to say, it's not like I hate people. Obviously, my job is connecting with people. But I was exhausted and I was definitely overwhelmed because guess what they don't train you for in therapy school? They don't train you for a worldwide pandemic. And I was guarded because I was doing more sessions out of necessity than I ever had in my entire life and wasn't sure how to make sure that I didn't hit my own edges. And if I collapse, I can't show up for my clients and no one has space in their schedule. Like no one's available to pick up the slack. And back then it just felt like, oh my gosh, like I can't not show up for folks. And so, of course, technology felt perfect. And we're not there now. Maybe that was true for a certain amount of time. Maybe it was true for some of us longer than others. But this resemblance of connection, it's enough until it's not. Because solitude can really help us go deep, but connection is how we see ourselves reflected back with warmth. And both of those matter. And when we try to replace one with the other or explain away the tension with a shiny new label that I'm pretty sure the internet made up, we miss the truth underneath. Maybe I should say we miss a truth underneath. When we start to understand that longing for solitude and connection isn't a personality quirk, but maybe a nervous system story, we can finally ask a more honest question. And that is, it's not about what label fits me, but rather what I have learned to protect myself with and why was that protection necessary. Intimacy doesn't begin in the mind, and connection actually doesn't begin in the mind, it begins in the body. And so if you think of where I show up in the world as a sex and couples therapist these days, things like this, things that feel really far away from the bedroom or really far away from romance, guess what? It'll impact it. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So I want you to think now about the last time that you felt truly heard and understood. More than likely, there was eye contact. There was a shared rhythm of exchange. And the pauses that happen, those natural pauses that just occur during conversation, they probably felt safe rather than awkward. Online, especially in those asynchronous environments, those cues completely disappear. And the nervous system doesn't interpret that absence as neutral. It'll read it as uncertainty or even abandonment. And you might not think that this is a big deal until you look at the science. Neuroscience shows that disconnection activates the same regions of the brain involved in physical threat response. When presence fractures, our ability to co-regulate with others diminishes. And so when we rely on technology to ground us, to soothe us, and to hold our emotional weight, we often end up dysregulated instead. That's why I appreciate small gestures of care. Even if you are consuming things online, and even if they're consumed in an asynchronous way, there are ways to, I think, communicate more care. For example, the one that comes to mind is one of my favorite go-to reads, or maybe favorite's not the right word, maybe it feels more like a necessary read these days, is the historian Heather Cox Richardson. And she has this beautiful habit of noting whether a piece that she has published is okay to read before bed or if it's better left until the morning. Now, part of this is functional because she tends to, she reports on what's going on throughout the day and is publishing it at night. So that's why, read before bed or the morning. But in this small gesture, I think she's acknowledging something really important. And actually, three things. One, timing matters. Two, your capacity matters. And three, your nervous system matters. And without those cues, we can find ourselves in a place that we didn't expect ourselves to be. And, while the world does not revolve around or operate in the context of, trigger warnings and stuff like that, I understand that. And there are also times where it is a kindness to consider when somebody might come across your words. This is one of those ways that even in a asynchronous context, somebody is allowing us to feel truly considered, even though it doesn't involve embodiment. So it is possible. It just takes a little bit more thought and care to pull off. Here's another way that you can tell that intimacy is important, because the people who are creating our technology, they realize it. You want some proof? Okay. Even texting, the people who make your text apps, they try to signal connection and not being abandoned. How is that? Well, it's those three little dots hovering, and it's a reminder that someone is almost there. And I think it's really interesting that we're trying to signal connection even across the divide. It's like I don't know if those people actually know that that's why they're doing it. I'm sure somebody's smart enough to have figured it out. Like, this is not an original idea. And at the same time, isn't that interesting that we're trying to add more signals of, hey, there's another human being and another person on the other end of this interaction, even when we're using technology. Okay, I want to change gears a little bit so I can get back to presence. Recently, I had a couple clients try a pretty simple experiment, and you can try it too. It doesn't matter if you live alone or with another person. It does change it a little bit, but I think it might be interesting to try either way. It's for one evening, no phone, no TV, no scrolling. And for some people, even if you're somebody who's like, well, I don't do those things anyway, I just go and I get lost in my, romance novel or fantasy book or something like that. Nope, not that either. Nothing where your brain is going to get pulled out of the here and now. It's just one evening, and see what happens. People came back and one person said, well, that was kind of uncomfortable at first, but eventually I noticed my breathing, and I actually did those breathing exercises that you taught me to do and that I've never done. I love when people just say like the real thing. Another one said that she hadn't realized both how quiet and how noisy it was in her home, that there were these little ticks and the heater kicking on, or, what you could hear outside and in the neighborhood, or how much somebody enjoyed actually sitting in their living room, and that it was a beautiful space. And then they found themselves wanting to light candles and like adjust the lighting. And then they made a cup of tea, and it became this experience instead of something that was essentially forgettable because it was just lost in the scroll. And some people said like it was awkward and it was uncomfortable. Okay, that's okay. The discomfort isn't a failure. It's information, it's data. For my couples, it was really interesting to hear what happened. Several of them had real conversations. A couple had sex, and, and some people just, hung out and they spent time. The truth is that regardless of what the person or couple ended up doing, intimacy requires attention, and not just towards others, but towards ourselves. And, I'm not suggesting that the answer is to abandon technology. Obviously, you have to have someplace to get your podcasts. But maybe, or should I say, and maybe it's about remembering what the technology was meant to do and the purpose of that technology instead of being a mindless habit that we just kind of get into. The point of so much of our technology is about connection, not, endless consumption. If you are enjoying this episode, if what we're talking about resonates for you, I would love for you to follow the show and leave us a 5-star review. Those 5-star reviews help people find the show and help these conversations reach the people that need to hear them. People who are craving something a little slower, a little deeper, and definitely more human. So, thank you so much for being part of that. Okay, back to the show. So, I guess I'll leave you with a couple thoughts. Maybe the tension that so many of us feel between wanting solitude and craving connection isn't something that is going to be resolved or even needs to resolve. Maybe it's just something to be mindful of and curious about. Solitude can be deeply restorative. It can quiet the noise. It can help us remember who we are. And it can help us get underneath expectation and performance. And connection is also how we are met, how we feel reflected, and how we learn that we don't have to disappear in order to be safe. And when connection hasn't always felt safe, it makes sense that solitude becomes the place that we go and just exhale and learn to be. That is not about being broken. That is really just about how we have adapted. And adaptation isn't the same as choice. There is a difference between solitude that heals and solitude as body armor. There's also a difference between connection that overwhelms and consumes and connection that holds us. And maybe the work isn't choosing one over the other. It's about slowly learning, what does safety feel like with ourselves and with others? And in a world that offers constant stimulation and also endless explanations, maybe the most radical act might be this. 1, not labeling ourselves. 2, not perpetually trying to optimize ourselves. And 3, listening. Listening to ourselves, listening to our bodies, listening to what we're longing for, listening to what we learned to survive, and also listening for what might be ready for something new, ready to soften. And by the way, if this conversation is interesting to you, be sure to let me know so that in a future episode, we can talk about the things that actually matter to you. I am happy to talk more about that distinction between adaptive solitude and earned safety, or how intimacy changes when we no longer have to choose between being alone or being ourselves. There are a million different directions that we can take this, and I want this to serve you. So be sure to let me know. Thanks again. Thank you so much for joining me for this after hours conversation. If something in today's episode made you pause, get curious, or see yourself a little more clearly, share it with a friend and keep that conversation going. Until next time, keep exploring that messy, beautiful space between meaning and being human. I'll see you next time.